My name is Hazel Torres. I'm 28 years old, and I teach art to third graders who still believe the world is fundamentally good. I used to believe that too. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on your door wearing a villain's mask. It walks in with your father's face, sits down at your grandfather's funeral reception, and asks if you want more coffee while signing away your inheritance behind your back. I thought losing Grandpa Eduardo was the worst pain I'd ever feel. I was wrong. What hurt more wasn't his death. It was discovering that my own family had been circling his estate like vultures before his body was even cold, planning how to erase me from his will without my knowledge. They sold his house, the 1904 Victorian style in southeast Portland, where I'd spent every summer learning to mix paint colors in his woodworking studio, where we'd planted tomatoes that grew taller than me, where he taught me that family meant choosing each other every single day. $847,000. Gone. Forged signatures, fraudulent documents, my own father's handwriting pretending to be mine. When I came home from Japan and found strangers living in what was supposed to be my inheritance, my father looked me straight in the eye and told me I must have misunderstood Grandpa's intentions. He said it so smoothly, so convincingly, that for one horrible moment, I almost believed him. But here's what my father didn't know. Grandpa Eduardo was always 3 steps ahead, and he'd known exactly what his sons were capable of. This is the story of how a dead man's love protected me better than any living family member ever did. Before we dive into how I set myself free, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. Where are you watching from? Drop your city below in the comments. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Grandpa Eduardo came to America from Mexico in 1967 with $73 and a toolbox his own father had built by hand. By the time I was born, he owned that Victorian house free and clear, ran a custom furniture business from the carriage house out back, and had the kind of reputation where people waited 6 months for one of his pieces. My earliest memory is the smell of cedar and linseed oil, the way sawdust caught the afternoon light coming through his studio windows. I was 4, maybe 5, sitting on his workbench while he sanded a rocking chair, explaining in his careful, accented English why you always work with the grain, never against it. "Mija," he'd say, "the wood tells you what it wants to be. Your job is to listen." He taught me to listen to everything, to the quiet, to the spaces between words, to what people didn't say. My father, Richard, his oldest son, visited twice a year, Christmas and Grandpa's birthday. He'd show up in his Mercedes, kiss Grandpa's cheek, compliment the house, and leave within 2 hours. My Uncle Marcus came even less, but me? I was there every weekend, every summer. Every time my mother said she needed space, or my stepmother Diane made it clear I was a reminder of my father's first marriage. Grandpa's house became my house, my refuge. When I was 12, my father forgot my birthday completely. Diane had just had Blake, my half-brother, and suddenly there was no room in their lives for the daughter from before. I showed up at Grandpa's house crying so hard I couldn't speak. He didn't ask questions. He just made hot chocolate, sat me down at his kitchen table, and said, "Hazel, I'm going to tell you something true. Blood doesn't make family. Choice does. Your father, he chose his comfort. But you will always have a choice too. And this house, this will always choose you back." He meant it. When I was 16 and painting had become the only thing that made sense, Grandpa cleared out half his studio for me, built me custom shelves for my supplies, installed north-facing windows for the best light. "Every artist needs a sanctuary," he told me. "This is yours." When I was 23 and got accepted to teach English in Japan but couldn't afford the startup costs, Grandpa wrote me a check, $5,000. When I tried to refuse, he closed my hand around it and said, "This is what money is for, mija. Helping the people we love become who they're meant to be." The last real conversation we had was 3 months before he died. I'd just gotten back from my first year in Tokyo, and we were in his garden, harvesting tomatoes in the late August heat. He was 79 but still strong, still moving through the world with that quiet certainty. "I'm getting old, Hazel," he said suddenly. "Grandpa, don't." "Listen." He set down his basket and looked at me with those dark eyes that had always seen too much. "I need you to know something. This house, this land, it's yours. Not your father's, not Marcus's. Yours. I've made sure of it legally, but mija, they're going to fight you. Richard, he's always believed the world owes him something for being born first. Marcus thinks love is a transaction. And Diane?" He shook his head. "She sees people as stepping stones." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I won't always be here to protect you, but I can protect you even when I'm gone. I've done things, put things in place. Trust Margaret Chen. She's my attorney, my friend. If anything happens, if anyone tries to take what's yours, you go to her. Promise me." I promised. I didn't understand then what he was really saying. 6 weeks later, he had a massive stroke in his sleep. By the time I got back from Japan, he was already gone. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Small, quiet, exactly how Grandpa would have wanted. Father Miguel from St. Ignatius said beautiful things about a man who built with his hands and loved with his whole heart. My father and Uncle Marcus sat in the front row, looking appropriately somber in their expensive suits. I wore the dress Grandpa had bought me for my college graduation. Simple, blue, nothing fancy. Diane kept glancing at it with that particular expression she reserved for things she considered beneath her station. After the service, everyone gathered at Grandpa's house. It felt wrong. All these people in his space, eating catered sandwiches and speaking in hushed voices. But what felt even more wrong was watching my father move through the rooms like he was appraising them. "Beautiful property," I heard him tell someone. "Prime location. The neighborhood's really come up in value." Uncle Marcus was doing the same thing, I realized, taking photos on his phone, measuring windows with his eyes. At one point, I caught them in Grandpa's study with Diane, speaking in low voices that stopped the moment I walked in. "Hazel," my father said, too brightly, "how long are you staying in Portland?" "I'm not sure yet. I need to figure out what happens with the house." Something flickered across his face. "What do you mean?" "Grandpa left it to me. He told me before he died." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. "Sweetheart," Diane said in that syrupy voice she used when she was about to say something cruel, "grief can make us remember things differently than they actually. I'm not misremembering. He was very clear." My father exchanged a look with Marcus. "Well, let's not worry about all that right now. There'll be time to sort through the legal stuff later. For now, why don't you head back to Japan? You have your teaching contract, don't you? We'll handle everything here." "Handle what?" "The estate. It's complicated, Hazel. Taxes, probate, all very boring adult stuff. Marcus and I have experience with this. You should focus on your career." It sounded reasonable. It sounded like care. But something in the way he said it, the way they were all looking at me, made my skin prickle. "I'll stay," I said. "I want to be part of the process." My father's smile tightened. Of course you do." But the invitations stopped coming. When I called to ask about meeting with the estate attorney, my father said it had been handled. When I asked to see the will, he said there were delays with probate. When I suggested coming by to start going through Grandpa's things, Diane said they'd already donated most of it to charity. "We thought you'd appreciate not having to deal with all that painful sorting," she said. "It's better this way. Clean break." I felt like I was going crazy. Every question was met with reassurance that felt like gaslighting. Every attempt to be involved was redirected, postponed, dismissed. Then Uncle Marcus called. "Hazel, your father and I have been thinking. This house, it's a lot for someone your age. The maintenance, the taxes. What if we sold it and put the money in a trust for you? You'd get monthly payments, enough to live comfortably. No stress, no responsibility. Grandpa didn't leave me monthly payments. He left me his house. Did he, though? Marcus's voice went cold. Have you actually seen the will? No, but then maybe you should consider the possibility that you're misremembering what he said. You were grieving. He was old. These things happen. I hung up, shaking. Something was very, very wrong. I called my father 4 times over the next week. He didn't answer. I drove to his house, the McMansion in West Lynn, with the 3-car garage and the landscaping that cost more than most people's salaries. Diane answered the door but wouldn't let me in. Richard's very busy, Hazel. This really isn't a good time. When is a good time? I need to talk to him about Grandpa's estate. There's nothing to talk about. Everything's been handled. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. The house sold last week. Richard and Marcus felt it was best. You'll get your share once everything clears probate. The door closed in my face. I stood on that pristine porch in my teaching clothes, paint-stained cardigan, clearance rack jeans, staring at the closed door, trying to make the words make sense. Sold. Grandpa's house. My house. The place he'd promised would always choose me back. Sold. I drove to southeast Portland doing 15 under the speed limit because my hands were shaking too badly to trust them. I told myself there'd been a mistake, some administrative error. Maybe it was a different property. Maybe Diane had been lying just to hurt me because that's what Diane did. But when I pulled up to Grandpa's Victorian, there was a Honda Odyssey in the driveway, a basketball hoop by the garage, children's bikes on the porch. A woman came out, mid-30s, blonde, carrying a laundry basket. "Can I help you?" she called out. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed completely. "Are you okay?" She set down the basket, concerned now. "Do you need me to call someone?" "This is my house," I heard myself say. "This is my grandfather's house." Her expression shifted from concern to alarm. "I'm sorry, but we bought this house 3 weeks ago. We have all the paperwork. If there's some kind of dispute, you need to talk to the title company, not us." "Who did you buy it from?" "The previous owners, Eduardo Torres's estate. His sons handled everything." His sons. The world tilted sideways. I drove to my father's office downtown, made it past the receptionist by saying it was a family emergency, walked right into his glass-walled office where he was on a conference call, and stood there until he had to acknowledge me. "Hazel, I'm in the middle of... You sold it." He put the call on mute. "Can we discuss this later? You sold Grandpa's house without telling me. Hazel, lower your voice. I have clients." "I don't care about your clients. That was my inheritance." He stood up, all 6 feet of him in his tailored suit, using his height to intimidate me the way he'd done my whole life. "Your inheritance? Hazel, you're 28 years old with a teacher's salary. You couldn't afford the property taxes on that house, let alone the maintenance. We did you a favor." "We?" "Marcus and I. We're the executors of the estate. We made the decision we felt was best for everyone." "Did Grandpa leave you as executors, or did you just decide that for yourselves?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Be very careful about what you're accusing me of." "Where's the will? Show me the actual will." "It's with the attorney." "Which attorney?" "Because Grandpa used Margaret Chen, and I'm betting she's never heard from you." His jaw clenched. "You need to leave. Now." "Where's my money? You sold the house for almost $1 million. Where's my share?" "There is no share. The house was left to Marcus and me. Grandpa changed his will 6 months before he died. You weren't in it." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're lying." "I'm not, and if you continue to harass me, I'll have security escort you out, possibly press charges. Your choice." I left because I couldn't breathe, because the walls were closing in, because my father, the man who'd forgotten my 12th birthday but remembered to forge my signature on legal documents, was looking at me like a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be loved. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour, maybe longer. The sun shifted. The concrete grew cold. My phone rang 4 times. I didn't answer. Everything Grandpa had promised me, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd tried to protect me from, gone. And my father had just looked me in the eye and lied about it with the practiced ease of someone who'd been planning this for a very long time. I'm going to stop here for a second. If this story is resonating with you at all, or if you've ever felt the pain of being misunderstood by the people who are supposed to love you most, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It really lets me know that sharing these hard stories is worth it. I spent that night in a Motel 6 off I-205 because I couldn't face my tiny apartment, couldn't face the walls covered in paintings I'd created in Grandpa's studio, couldn't face the life I'd built on the foundation of believing my family was flawed but ultimately wouldn't destroy me. I was wrong. The next morning, I called Margaret Chen. Her secretary said she was in court but would call me back. I waited in that motel room, watching HGTV shows about people renovating houses they actually got to keep, and tried not to think about whether Grandpa's new owners had painted over the growth chart he'd marked on the kitchen doorframe. My height every summer from age 4 to 18, evidence that I'd existed there, that I'd been loved there. Margaret called back at 3:15. "Hazel, I've been trying to reach you." "My father said Grandpa changed his will, that I wasn't in it." The silence on the other end lasted too long. "Hazel, I need you to come to my office tomorrow, 10 a.m. Can you do that?" "Just tell me, did he change it?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Please." She hung up. I didn't sleep. I laid in that scratchy motel bed, watching the ceiling fan spin and spinning with it, trying to figure out how my life had become unrecognizable in the span of 3 weeks. Grandpa dead, house sold, family lying, everything gone. At 9:45 the next morning, I walked into Margaret Chen's office in downtown Portland. She was 62, sharp-eyed, and dressed like someone who'd won every argument they'd ever had. Photos on her desk showed her with Grandpa at various events over the years, a fundraiser, a gallery opening featuring his furniture, someone's wedding. They'd been friends, real friends. She gestured for me to sit, then pulled out a thick file. "Your grandfather's will was never changed," she said without preamble. "He left everything, the house, his savings, his tools, all of it, to you. Your father and uncle forged documents, created a fraudulent will, and sold property they had no legal right to sell." The words washed over me like cold water. How? They're sophisticated men with access to resources. They hired someone to create fake probate documents. They forged your signature on quitclaim deeds. They even created a backdated codicil supposedly signed by your grandfather that left everything to them jointly. It's all fake, Hazel, all of it. Then why haven't you done anything? She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. Who says I haven't? She opened the file. Inside were text messages, screenshots of conversations between my father, Marcus, and Diane, planning the sale, discussing how much they could get, laughing about how I was too naive to notice. Richard, she actually believed him when he said that house was hers. Marcus, Eduardo always was sentimental about her. Diane, well, sentiment doesn't pay for Blake's college. Let's get this done before she comes back from Japan. I read them 3 times, then a 4th. How did you get these? Rosario Gutierrez, your grandfather's housekeeper. Rosa? She's been documenting your father's visits for years. Your grandfather asked her to. He knew, Hazel. He knew what his sons were capable of, and he took precautions. Margaret pulled out another document. This one was a video file on a USB drive. He recorded this 2 months before he died. It's a video deposition explaining his wishes, specifically stating that under no circumstances should Richard or Marcus have any control over his estate. He also included this. She handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it, in Grandpa's handwriting. My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. Mija, if you're reading this, it means my sons tried to do exactly what I feared they would. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you that family is always good, always safe, but you and I both know that's not true. The house is yours. Margaret has all the legal documentation you need. She also has evidence of what Richard and Marcus have done. You have choices now. You can fight, or you can walk away. Either is acceptable to me. But know this. You are not what they tried to make you feel. Small, forgettable, easy to erase. You are brilliant and talented, and deserving of every good thing. You always have been. The work I'm most proud of isn't the furniture I built. It's you. Te quiero siempre, Grandpa. I cried in that office for 20 minutes, while Margaret sat quietly, occasionally pushing tissues across the desk. When I could finally speak, I asked, "What happens now?" Margaret's smile was absolutely feral. Now we go to war. The legal process took 7 months. 7 months of depositions and forensic accountants and handwriting analysts confirming that yes, my father had forged my signature. Yes, the will Richard and Marcus presented was fraudulent. Yes, Grandpa's original will, the one leaving everything to me, was legally binding and never revoked. Daniel Park, the forensic accountant Margaret brought in, traced every dollar. The house sale? $847,000. My father's share? $400,000. Immediately spent on Diane's country club membership, $75,000. A boat, $120,000. And investments in Marcus's hedge fund that turned out to be overleveraged and borderline fraudulent. Marcus's share? $447,000, split between Blake's college fund, a vacation property in Bend, and legal fees for the divorce he hadn't told anyone he was going through. The money was gone, spent, vanished into the lifestyle they felt entitled to. But the house sale? That was voidable. Because here's what my father and uncle never bothered to check. Grandpa had placed a restriction on the deed. The property couldn't be sold without my explicit, notarized consent until I turned 30. It was a legal mechanism called a life estate remainder with specific age-based contingencies, and it meant that every document they'd signed, every transaction they'd completed, was void from the start. Margaret explained it in the conference room, while Daniel pulled up spreadsheets, while Father Miguel provided written testimony about Grandpa's concerns about Richard's greed, while Rosa sat quietly in the corner with her notebooks full of dates and conversations and overheard plans. They didn't just commit fraud, she said. They committed it incompetently. The family who'd bought the house? They got their money back through title insurance. The title company who'd failed to catch the deed restriction? They covered the difference. And my father and Marcus? They owed me $847,000 they no longer had. Criminal charges came next. Fraud, forgery, elder exploitation, because selling a deceased person's property through fraudulent documents qualified. The district attorney was very interested in successful men who thought wealth made them above the law. My father's attorney called me 6 times trying to negotiate. I didn't take a single call. Diane called me crying, begging me to think about Blake. He's your brother. He didn't do anything wrong. I hung up before she finished the sentence. Marcus tried a different approach, intimidation. Showed up at my school, made it 15 feet into the building before the principal called security. I watched it all happen from behind Margaret's protection and Rosa's detailed documentation and Grandpa's perfect, meticulous planning. I watched my father lose his real estate license pending investigation, watched Marcus get suspended from his firm, watched Diane file for divorce the moment she realized Richard's assets were about to be frozen. And through all of it, I painted. I rented a studio space in southeast Portland, not Grandpa's house, which was tied up in legal proceedings, but close enough. I painted every emotion I couldn't speak: the betrayal, the grief, the rage, the weird, surprising relief of finally seeing my family clearly instead of through the desperate lens of a daughter who just wanted to be loved. I painted Grandpa's hands, the way they'd looked holding a piece of sandpaper guiding my much smaller hands through the motion, strong and scarred and sure. I painted the Victorian house as I remembered it, every room, every corner, the light through the studio windows, the garden in August, the kitchen where we'd made hot chocolate and promises. I painted my father's face the day he lied to me in his office, not with anger, with something closer to anthropological curiosity. Who was this man? What had made him believe love was something to exploit, rather than honor? My therapist, Dr. Keiko Sato, who specialized in family trauma, said I was processing, said that art was my way of taking back narrative control, said that healing didn't require forgiveness, just understanding, that their actions said everything about them and nothing about my worth. "You're not rebuilding yourself," she said one session. "You're excavating who you always were underneath their expectations." On the 7th-month anniversary of Grandpa's death, Margaret called. "The sale's been voided. The house reverts to the estate, which means it reverts to you. The criminal trial starts in 6 weeks. Your father and uncle are each facing up to 10 years. But Hazel, you won. Everything he wanted you to have, it's yours now." I went to the Victorian that evening, let myself in with the keys Margaret had recovered from evidence, walked through empty rooms that smelled like other people's lives. But underneath was still cedar and linseed oil, still Grandpa, still home. I'm 30 now, the age when Grandpa's deed restriction would have lifted anyway, when I could have sold the house on my own terms if I'd wanted to. I didn't want to. I moved in 6 months after the legal dust settled, spent another 6 months slowly reclaiming each room, painting walls, refinishing floors, bringing the house back to what it had been, what it was always meant to be. My father pleaded guilty to avoid trial, got 3 years, served 14 months. He hasn't contacted me since his release. Diane remarried, some tech investor she met at the country club before the membership got revoked. Blake is at community college. We're Facebook friends. Sometimes he likes my posts. It's enough. Marcus got 5 years. He's still inside. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks about the furniture Grandpa built, how Marcus used to trace the joinery with his fingers as a kid before he learned to see everything as numbers on a spreadsheet. Probably not. I turned Grandpa's studio into what he always wanted it to be, a community art space, free classes for kids who can't afford them, a place where teachers on modest salaries can come paint without worrying about supplies, a place that chooses people back. Above the door, I hung a sign in Grandpa's handwriting, taken from one of his old notebooks. "Every artist needs a sanctuary. This is yours." The woman who briefly owned this house before everything got sorted, she came by once with her kids, curious about what happened. I showed her the growth chart I had restored on the doorframe, the garden I had replanted, the studio full of students. "I'm glad it worked out," she said. "It's a house that deserves to be loved." It is, and it is. I still paint every day. I still teach third graders who believe the world is good. And sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I swear I can smell cedar and linseed oil, can hear Grandpa's voice saying what he always said. Mija, the wood tells you what it wants to be. Your job is to listen. I'm listening, Grandpa. I'm listening. And I'm finally exactly who you knew I would be. Have you ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you? How did you rebuild trust? What's one thing you learned about yourself after a betrayal? Share one moment in your healing journey that changed everything. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. This was another story from Revenge Room, where we turn pain into purpose and betrayal into balance. Please don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next transformation.